Emily stood outside the grand mansion, the cold wind biting at her skin. She had nothing left, no home, no love, no money. Mr. Benson had discarded her like yesterday's news, and the weight of her choices pressed down on her like a heavy stone. She had lost everything, and now she was utterly alone. Emily was a young woman living in Lagos, Nigeria. She had big dreams and a heart full of ambition. She wanted a life of comfort, far from the struggles she grew up with. Emily was in a relationship with David, a humble teacher who loved her deeply. They planned to get married one day, but Emily often wondered if their simple life would be enough for her. David was kind and thoughtful, always making sure Emily felt loved. But he didn't have much money. His salary as a teacher barely covered the basics, but he was saving every penny to build a future with Emily. He believed that with love, they could overcome anything. Then one day, everything changed. Emily met Mr. Benson, a wealthy businessman who lived in luxury. He was older, powerful, and rich, everything David was not. Mr. Benson noticed Emily and began to pursue her. He showered her with expensive gifts, fancy dinners, and promises of a life filled with riches. Emily was tempted. The life she had always dreamed of was within her reach. David could see the change in Emily. She started pulling away, spending more time with Mr. Benson. David tried to remind her of their love, of the plans they made together. But Emily's mind was clouded by the glitter of wealth. Mr. Benson promised her a life of ease and comfort, something David could never offer. The decision tore her apart, but in the end, she chose Mr. Benson. Emily's new life was everything she had imagined at first. She moved into Mr. Benson's mansion, attended glamorous parties, and traveled to places she had only seen in magazines. But as time passed, she started to notice cracks in the perfect picture. Mr. Benson was controlling, demanding, and often treated her as if she was just another possession. He was rarely home, and when he was cold and distant. Emily began to miss the simple, honest love she had with David. She missed the way he looked at her, the way he cared for her without expecting anything in return. The luxury that once thrilled her now felt empty and meaningless. But by the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. Mr. Benson grew tired of Emily. One day, without warning, he ended their relationship. Emily was left with nothing, no home, no money, no one to turn to. She tried to go back to David, hoping he would take her back, but when she found him, he was with someone else. David had moved on, and Emily was left to face the consequences of her choices alone. The once bright future she imagined had crumbled, leaving her in darkness. And now, as she stood outside that mansion, she understood the true cost of choosing money over love. Emily wandered the streets of Lagos, her mind racing with regret. She had nowhere to go. Her friends, the ones who had envied her relationship with Mr. Benson, had long disappeared when his interest in her waned. The few calls she made were ignored, and the glamorous lifestyle she had flaunted was now a distant memory. Days turned into weeks, and Emily struggled to survive. She sold the few belongings she had left, but it wasn't enough. The money she once chased had slipped through her fingers like sand. She found herself sleeping in rundown hostels, searching for work, but doors that once opened for her were now slammed shut. The shine that once surrounded her had faded, and people looked at her with pity or disdain. One evening, as Emily sat by the side of the road, her stomach growling with hunger, she saw a familiar face. It was David, walking hand in hand with the woman he had chosen to spend his life with. They were laughing, their faces glowing with happiness. Emily's heart ached as she watched them pass by unnoticed. She wanted to call out, to beg for forgiveness, but the words caught in her throat. She followed them at a distance, her eyes never leaving David. They entered a small, cozy restaurant, the kind she and David used to go to. She peered through the window, watching as David pulled out a chair for his new love, his smile warm and genuine. It was the same smile he used to give her, a smile that once made her feel like the luckiest woman in the world. As Emily stood there, a tear slipped down her cheek. She had thrown away the one person who truly loved her for something as fleeting as wealth. The reality of her situation hit her like a ton of bricks. She had chosen money over love, and now she had nothing. She turned away from the window, her heart heavy with sorrow. She knew she couldn't stay in Lagos, where every corner reminded her of what she had lost. She needed to leave, to start over somewhere new, far from the shadows of her past. But as Emily walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost more than just love. She had lost herself. The girl who once believed in love, who dreamt of a simple, happy life, was gone. In her place was someone who had paid the ultimate price for chasing a dream that wasn't real. Emily found herself at a train station, a place she had never thought she would end up. She bought a ticket to a town she had never heard of, hoping to escape the pain that haunted her every step. The train was old, the seats worn, but Emily didn't care. She just needed to get away. As the train pulled out of the station, Emily stared out the window, watching the city of Lagos fade into the distance. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was clear: she would never make the same mistake again. She had learned, too late, that love was worth more than all the money in the world. But the journey wasn't over. Emily's life had taken a sharp turn, and what lay ahead was uncertain. Would she find redemption? Would she ever forgive herself for the choices she made? Only time would tell as the train carried her into the unknown. The train rattled on through the night, the sound of the wheels on the tracks a constant rhythm in Emily's ears. She couldn't sleep. Her mind was filled with memories, David's laughter, the warmth of his embrace, the way he looked at her as if she was the only person in the world. She could almost hear his voice, whispering her name with love and care. But now, all of that was gone, replaced by the cold, empty reality she had chosen for herself. When the train finally stopped at a small, quiet town, Emily stepped off, feeling the weight of her decision more than ever. The town was nothing like Lagos. It was peaceful, with narrow streets lined with trees and simple homes. People moved slowly here, their faces showing the wear of hard work but also a quiet contentment. Emily rented a small room in a rundown guest house. The walls were thin, and the bed was hard, but it was all she could afford. The first few days passed in a blur of loneliness and despair. She barely left her room, too ashamed to face the world. She had no job, no friends, and no idea where to start. One morning, as she wandered through the town, she noticed a small cafe with a help-wanted sign in the window. Desperate for any kind of work, she walked in and asked the owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, if the position was still available. The woman, Mrs. Thompson, looked Emily up and down, seeing the sadness in her eyes, and nodded. "Can you start tomorrow?" Mrs. Thompson asked gently. Emily nodded, grateful for the chance to do something, anything, to fill the emptiness inside her. The work was simple, cleaning tables, serving coffee, washing dishes, but it gave Emily a purpose. Mrs. Thompson didn't ask many questions, sensing that Emily was not ready to talk about her past. Instead, she offered quiet companionship and a listening ear whenever Emily needed it. Weeks turned into months, and Emily slowly started to rebuild her life. The people in the town were kind, though they didn't pry into her past. They accepted her for who she was now, a quiet, hard-working woman who kept to herself. But the pain of her choices still lingered, a constant reminder of the life she had lost. One day, as Emily was cleaning the cafe after closing time, Mrs. Thompson sat down at one of the tables, watching her carefully. "You know, dear," Mrs. Thompson began, her voice soft, "we all make mistakes, some bigger than others. But what matters is what we do afterward. You've been carrying a heavy burden. Maybe it's time to let it go." Emily paused, her hands trembling. She hadn't talked about her past with anyone, not even Mrs. Thompson. But something about the older woman's gentle tone made her feel safe. She sat down across from Mrs. Thompson, tears welling up in her eyes. I had everything," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "I had love, real love, but I threw it away for money. I thought it would make me happy, but it only brought me pain. I lost everything, my love, my home. even myself. I don't know how to move on." Mrs. Thompson reached across the table and took Emily's hand in hers. "The first step is forgiving yourself, Emily. You can't change the past, but you can choose how to live the rest of your life. Don't let your mistakes define you. Learn from them and find a new path, one that brings you true happiness." Emily nodded, wiping away her tears. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she could find a way to move forward, to build a new life, one that wasn't tainted by the mistakes of her past. But just as she began to feel a sense of peace, the door to the cafe opened, and a man stepped inside. Emily's heart stopped. It was David. He hadn't changed much. His hair was a little shorter, his face a little more worn, but his eyes were the same, kind, warm, and filled with a love she had once known so well. Emily froze, unable to speak, as David walked toward her. "Emily," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I've been looking for you." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she stood frozen, unable to believe her eyes. David, the man she had wronged, the man she had left behind, was standing before her. She had dreamed of this moment countless times, but now that it was happening, she didn't know what to say. "David," Emily finally whispered, her voice barely audible. David's eyes searched hers, and she could see the mix of emotions in his gaze: surprise, relief, and something deeper, something she feared might be anger. But there was also compassion, a glimmer of the love he once had for her. "I didn't expect to find you here," David said, taking a step closer. "I came to this town for work, but I never imagined I'd see you." Emily felt a wave of shame wash over her. How could she face him after everything she had done? The memories of their life together, the plans they had made, and the love they had shared all came rushing back, bringing with them the pain of her choices. "I'm sorry," Emily blurted out, the words tumbling from her lips before she could stop them. "I'm so sorry for everything. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I've regretted it every single day. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how much I wish I could go back and change it all." David stood there, silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Emily braced herself for the worst, for the words that would shatter whatever fragile hope she had left. But when David finally spoke, his voice was gentle, full of the kindness that had always been his nature. "Emily, I won't lie, what you did hurt me deeply. But I've had time to think, and I've come to realize that holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. We both made choices, and we both have to live with them. I moved on, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "David, I never stopped loving you," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I was foolish, blinded by things that never mattered. I don't expect you to take me back, but if I could have one thing, it would be your forgiveness. I can't move forward without it." David looked down, his face reflecting the weight of the decision before him. Emily held her breath, waiting, hoping for some sign of what he would say. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, David looked up, meeting her gaze with a sincerity that took her breath away. "Emily," he said slowly, "forgiveness isn't something that happens in an instant. It's a process, and it's something we have to work on day by day. But I do forgive you. We both deserve a chance to heal and find peace." Emily let out a shaky breath, feeling a huge weight lift from her shoulders. She had been so consumed by guilt, so certain that she had lost everything, that she hadn't allowed herself to hope for redemption. But here it was, offered to her by the very person she had wronged the most. "Thank you, David," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me that chance." David nodded, his expression softening. "We can't change the past, Emily, but we can choose how we move forward. I hope you find the happiness you're looking for." With that, David turned to leave, but Emily wasn't ready to let him go just yet. She took a step forward, her heart pounding. "David, wait," she called out, her voice filled with a mix of desperation and hope. David paused, turning back to her. "What is it, Emily?" Emily took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I know it's too late for us to be together like we were before, but maybe we can start over as friends? I don't want to lose you completely, not again." David considered her words, then gave her a small, warm smile. "I'd like that, Emily. We can take it one step at a time and see where it leads." A sense of relief washed over Emily. She knew she still had a long way to go to rebuild her life and heal the wound she had caused, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. She had been given a second chance, not just to make things right with David, but to find herself again. As David left the cafe, Emily watched him go, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she would never again let money or greed cloud her judgment. She had learned, the hard way, that true happiness came from love, not wealth. And now, with a renewed sense of purpose, Emily was ready to start the next chapter of her life, wherever it might lead. Days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself adjusting to her new reality. She threw herself into her work at the cafe, finding comfort in the routine and in the quiet moments she shared with Mrs. Thompson. The townspeople began to warm up to her, and soon, Emily was no longer just the quiet woman who had shown up one day. She was a part of their community. But despite the peace she found in her new life, there was always a shadow hanging over her, a lingering doubt, a fear that everything she had built could come crashing down at any moment. She couldn't shake the feeling that her past was never truly behind her, no matter how much she tried to move forward. One evening, after closing up the cafe, Emily decided to take a walk through the town. The air was cool, and the stars were just beginning to appear in the sky. As she walked, she found herself drawn to the small park on the edge of town. It was a quiet place, with a single bench under a large oak tree, where she often came to think. She sat down, the silence of the night wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. But her thoughts were far from peaceful. She kept replaying her conversation with David in her mind, wondering if she had truly done enough to make amends. The idea of starting over as friends was comforting, but the guilt of her past actions still weighed heavily on her heart. As she sat there, lost in thought, she heard the crunch of footsteps on the gravel path behind her. Emily turned, and to her surprise, she saw David approaching. His presence both comforted and unsettled her, stirring up emotions she wasn't sure how to handle. "David," she said, her voice a little shaky. "What are you doing here?" David smiled gently as he came to stand in front of her. "I was passing by and saw you here. Thought I'd check in on you." Emily nodded, her heart racing. "I've been doing okay. Better, I think. But there are still some things I'm trying to figure out." David took a seat beside her on the bench, his expression thoughtful. "I know it's not easy, Emily. Forgiving yourself, moving on, it takes time, but you've already come so far. I can see that." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Finally, David spoke again, his voice soft but steady. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot since we last talked," he said. "About everything that happened between us. About what we both lost." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this conversation, but she knew it was one they needed to have. "I don't think I ever really moved on," David continued, his eyes meeting hers. "I tried to bury my feelings, to pretend like I was okay. But seeing you again, it brought everything back. I still care about you, Emily. Maybe more than I should." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. After everything that had happened, after all the pain they had both gone through, she had assumed that whatever they had was gone for good. But here's David, opening up to her in a way she hadn't dared to hope for. "I care about you too, David," she admitted, her voice trembling. "More than I can even put into words. But I'm scared. I've made so many mistakes, and I don't want to hurt you again." David reached out, taking her hand in his. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down her spine. "We've both changed, Emily. We're not the same people we were before. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means we can start fresh, without all the baggage of the past." Emily looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was sincerity. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that they could have a second chance. But the fear of repeating her past mistakes was still there, gnawing at her. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." David squeezed her hand gently, his expression full of understanding. "You don't have to be ready right now. We can take it slow, one day at a time. But I need you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. You're not alone in this." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She had spent so long feeling alone, so long believing that she had lost everything that mattered. But now, with David by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward together. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve this, but I want to try. I want to try and make things right." David smiled, a warmth in his eyes that made Emily's heart ache in the best way possible. "That's all I ask, Emily. We'll take it one step at a time, together." They sat there for a long time, hand in hand, the silence between them no longer heavy with unspoken regrets, but filled with the promise of a new beginning. The night stretched on, but for the first time in a long while, Emily didn't feel the darkness pressing in on her. Instead, she felt the first rays of light, breaking through the clouds of her past. But even as she allowed herself to hope, she knew their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be difficult, full of challenges and uncertainties. But with David by her side, Emily was ready to face whatever came next. She had lost everything once before, but maybe, just maybe, she had found something even more precious in the process, a second chance at love, and a future she had thought was out of reach. As the weeks passed, Emily and David worked to rebuild their connection, taking small, cautious steps forward. Their interactions were filled with moments of genuine warmth and shared laughter, but also with the weight of past mistakes and the uncertainty of the future. They both knew that trust, once broken, was hard to restore, but they were determined to give their relationship a real chance. Emily found solace in her new routine, balancing her work at the cafe with the growing friendship she shared with David. They began to spend more time together, walking through the town, enjoying simple meals, and sharing their dreams and fears. It was a slow process, but each day they seemed to draw a little closer, finding joy in the small things that had once been overshadowed by their past. One day, as Emily was leaving the cafe, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Jake, her former business partner. The sight of him stirred up a rush of memories, of the choices she had made, the ambition that had driven her away from David, and the wealth she had thought would bring her happiness. Jake approached her, a look of surprise and concern on his face. "Emily, is that you?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, it's me. What are you doing here?" Jake's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I heard you were in town. I wanted to see how you were doing." Emily sighed, her heart heavy. "I'm doing all right. I've been working at the cafe and trying to make sense of everything that's happened." Jake looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I heard about the business troubles you went through. I'm sorry, Emily. I know things didn't end well between us." Emily nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. "I appreciate that. I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm still trying to figure out how to fix them." Jake took a deep breath. "I've been doing some thinking myself. I realized that I was too focused on the money and not enough on the people who mattered. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I see now that we both were blinded by ambition." Emily was taken aback by his honesty. She had always thought of Jake as someone who only cared about profit and power. To hear him acknowledge his own faults was unexpected and, in a strange way, comforting. "Thank you for saying that," Emily said softly. "It means a lot to hear it." Jake gave her a small smile. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Emily. It's not too late to make things right." As Jake left, Emily felt a mix of relief and sadness. The encounter had forced her to confront her past decisions once more, but it also gave her a sense of closure. She had been so focused on her own mistakes that she hadn't fully realized how her actions had affected those around her. That evening, Emily and David met for dinner at a small restaurant. They talked about their day, about the things they had learned, and the experiences they had shared. David listened attentively, his presence a steady source of support and understanding. After dinner, as they walked through the quiet streets of the town, Emily decided to share her encounter with Jake. David listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. "It sounds like you've had a lot to process," David said finally. "I'm glad you had that conversation with Jake. Sometimes, facing the past can help us move forward." Emily nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "It was difficult, but it also reminded me of how far I've come. I've made peace with my past, and now I want to focus on building a better future." David reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You're doing great, Emily. I believe in you." They continued their walk, their conversation shifting to lighter topics, but the connection between them was stronger than ever. Emily felt a renewed sense of hope, not just for her relationship with David, but for her own personal growth. As they reached the park where they had shared so many moments, David stopped and turned to her. "Emily, I've been thinking. There's something I'd like to ask you." Emily looked at him, her heart racing. "What is it?" David took a deep breath, his eyes filled with earnestness. "I know we've been taking things slow, but I want you to know that I see a future with you. I want us to build something together, something real. Will you take this journey with me?" Emily's heart swelled with emotion. She had been so afraid of making the same mistakes, of falling back into old patterns, but David's words filled her with a sense of hope and possibility. She had spent so long trying to find her way, and now, with David by her side, she felt ready to embrace the future. "Yes, David," she said, her voice steady. "I want to build a future with you. I want to take this journey together, and I believe we can create something beautiful." David's face lit up with a smile, and he pulled her into a warm embrace. As they stood there under the stars, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. She had learned many lessons along the way about love, forgiveness, and the true meaning of happiness. And now, with David by her side, she was ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that she had finally found the balance between love and ambition. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of new beginnings for Emily and David. They started to blend their lives more deeply, finding joy in the mundane and comfort in each other's presence. Emily's work at the cafe continued to thrive, and she even began to take on more responsibilities, finding fulfillment in her growing role within the community. David, meanwhile, had managed to secure a stable position in town, which allowed him to be more present and supportive. They were able to share their lives in ways they hadn't before, and their relationship flourished with each passing day. Yet, as happy as Emily was, there was an underlying tension that she couldn't quite shake. It was the weight of her past decisions and the fear of repeating them. One day, as Emily was preparing to close the cafe, she received an unexpected phone call from an old contact in the city. It was an offer to return to her former business, a lucrative position with significant financial incentives. The opportunity was tempting, and it stirred old feelings of ambition and the promise of wealth. For a moment, Emily was torn between her desire for financial security and the life she was building with David. She shared the news with David that evening, her voice betraying her inner conflict. "I got a call today. They want me to come back to the city for a high-paying job. It's a fantastic offer, but..." David looked at her, his expression a mix of concern and understanding. "I know how important this opportunity is to you, Emily, but remember what we've been building here. It's easy to get caught up in the lure of money, but we've made so much progress. Do you think going back is worth risking what we have now?" Emily sighed, feeling the familiar tug-of-war between her old desires and her new life. "I don't know. Part of me feels like this is a chance I can't pass up, but another part of me worries about losing everything we've worked so hard for." David reached out, taking her hand in his. "Think about what's most important to you. What do you really want? This decision will shape your future, but it doesn't have to define it. Whatever choice you make, I'll support you." Emily spent a restless night, turning the offer over in her mind. She recalled the loneliness she felt in the city, the sacrifices she made for wealth, and the emptiness that accompanied her material success. At the same time, she thought about her life with David, the warmth and simplicity they shared, and the genuine connections she had begun to build in their small town. The next morning, Emily made her decision. She called the contact and politely declined the offer, choosing instead to focus on her life in the town with David. She felt a surge of relief and clarity, knowing that she was prioritizing what truly mattered. David greeted her with a proud smile when she shared her decision. "I'm really proud of you, Emily. It takes courage to turn down an opportunity like that, especially when it's something you've worked so hard for." Emily hugged him tightly, feeling a sense of peace. "Thank you for supporting me. I've realized that I don't need all the money in the world to be happy. What I have here with you and the life we're building is worth more than any financial gain." As time went on, Emily and David continued to grow closer, their bond strengthened by the trials they had faced and the choices they had made. Their life was far from perfect, but it was filled with love, honesty, and a deep appreciation for the simple pleasures that came with it. Emily's decision had reinforced a valuable lesson. While money can offer comfort and security, it cannot replace the true richness of a life filled with love and meaningful relationships. She had learned that happiness and fulfillment came from valuing what truly mattered and making choices that aligned with her heart. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the park where their journey had begun, David turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've been thinking about how far we've come. It's amazing to see what happens when we choose love over everything else." Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. "It really is. Sometimes, the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. We've made it through so much, and I'm grateful for every moment of it." As they stood together under the stars, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had learned that true success was not measured by wealth, but by the love and happiness she had found in her life. With David by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together, they could overcome anything. Their story was a testament to the power of love and the importance of making choices that reflect what truly matters. Emily had found her way back to the heart of what was important, and in doing so, she had discovered that the greatest riches were the connections and relationships that enriched her life. Months went by, and Emily and David's life settled into a comforting rhythm. They had found their stride, balancing work, community activities, and the growing joy of their relationship. Emily felt fulfilled in ways she had never imagined before. The cafe was thriving, and she had even started to take on community projects, helping to organize local events and charity drives. However, the past had a way of sneaking back into their lives. One day, as Emily was preparing for a charity event at the cafe, she received an unexpected letter. It was from an old acquaintance, a journalist who had been covering the business world in the city. The letter revealed that her former business, now in the hands of new management, had faced a series of scandals and financial troubles. The business empire she had once been a part of was crumbling, and her name was mentioned in the context of the initial downfall. The news hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Her heart raced as she read through the letter, the weight of her past mistakes pressing heavily on her. She had worked so hard to build a new life, and now it seemed that her past was trying to drag her back into the spotlight. When David returned home, he noticed the distress on Emily's face. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched in his voice. Emily handed him the letter, her hands trembling. "It's about my old business. It's falling apart, and they're mentioning my name in the reports." David read through the letter, his expression darkening as he finished. "I'm so sorry, Emily. This must be really hard for you." Emily nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I thought I had left all of this behind. I was happy here, and now it feels like everything is coming back to haunt me." David reached for her, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "You've worked so hard to build a new life. Don't let this past issue take away the happiness you've found. We'll face this together." The next few days were a whirlwind. The media picked up the story, and Emily found herself in the midst of unwanted attention. Despite her efforts to stay out of the spotlight, the reports and rumors spread, stirring up old acquaintances and former colleagues who wanted to rekindle connections or make a quick buck off her past. One evening, as Emily and David were working late at the cafe, they heard a commotion outside. A group of reporters had gathered, trying to get a glimpse of Emily and her reaction to the unfolding drama. The situation was tense, and Emily felt overwhelmed. David stood by her side, his presence a steady source of strength. "We need to address this," he said firmly. "Let's face it head-on and show that we're moving forward, no matter what the past says." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She stepped outside with David, facing the crowd of reporters with a composed demeanor. "I want to thank you all for your interest, but I have nothing more to add. I am focused on my current life and the work I am doing here. My past does not define who I am today." The reporters buzzed with questions, but Emily remained firm. She spoke with honesty and clarity, refusing to let the past overshadow her present. David stood beside her, his support unwavering. In the weeks that followed, the media frenzy gradually subsided. Emily and David continued to navigate the challenges together, finding solace in their shared commitment to each other and their new life. Emily's resilience and honesty had helped her reclaim her narrative, and the community rallied around her, offering support and encouragement. As the dust settled, Emily and David took a moment to reflect on their journey. They sat together in the park, the same place where they had shared their hopes and fears. The park was now a symbol of their renewed strength and unity. "I'm so grateful for everything we've been through," David said softly. "We've faced so many challenges, but we've come out stronger on the other side." Emily looked at him, her heart full. "I've learned so much from this experience. I've realized that no matter how hard the past tries to pull you back, what matters most is how you move forward. I'm grateful for your support and for the life we've built together." David smiled, his eyes filled with love and pride. "We've made it through the storm, and now we can focus on building our future, one step at a time." As they walked hand in hand, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. She had learned that true success and happiness were not defined by money or status, but by the love and connections she had nurtured. She had faced the shadows of her past and emerged stronger, with a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life and the strength of her relationships. Their journey had been fraught with difficulties, but it had also been filled with moments of growth and redemption. Emily had discovered that the greatest wealth was not measured in dollars and cents, but in the love and support of those who mattered most. With David by her side, she felt ready to embrace whatever the future held, confident that their love and commitment would guide them through any challenge. The moral lesson of this story centers on the consequences of prioritizing wealth and social status over genuine love and happiness. Emily's choice to marry Mr. Benson for his wealth, despite her love for David, leads her into a life of isolation and regret. The story highlights the importance of making decisions based on love, authenticity, and personal values rather than being swayed by materialistic desires or external pressures. It suggests that true happiness comes from being with those who genuinely care for and respect you, rather than from wealth or status, which can often lead to emptiness and dissatisfaction. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from and what valuable lesson you learned. We'd love to hear from you.